Okay. Welcome, everybody. You are listening to the Startup Secrets for Entrepreneur. I am your host, Shelby Oleschlager, and our mission is to help entrepreneurs make a difference and navigate the messy world of startup or relaunch. Join me today where we dig deep with our guests to get you the best concepts and strategies to fast track your business. Today, we have Jill Reynolds. Is that correct? Reynolds?
Reynolds.
Yeah. Okay. I always have to make sure. I probably should have said that sooner, but she's the host of The Connection Show, where she's known for inspiring hope, health, and healing. So absolutely love what you're doing. And I'm really curious just to give us a little bit of insight to what it is that you do.
Well, thank you so much, Shelby, for having me. It's a privilege to be here with you and your audience. So what inspired my business, it's kind of a strange story if you want me to take you on that journey.
Yes.
Is my background had been in outside sales for 40 some years, always being extremely successful. My last sales job was director of sales and general manager at hotel properties, where I had gone back to school and gotten my certification in meeting and event planning. So I had done that, and at one hotel, I actually increased the sales in 12 months by 42%, which is unheard of because most increased sales in hotel properties are about 5 to 10% annually. And then I was in a major car accident, Shelby, which left me disabled, and I could not do my job at the hotel anymore. But I had my certification as a meeting and event planner. And I've got 40 some years of recovery from drugs and alcohol and eating disorders and codependency. And so I had done quite a lot of personal work on myself. So I reached out to a world-renowned drama therapist, Dr. Laura Wood, and asked her if she would like to do transformational retreats with me. So she said yes. And so thus began Braveheart Workshops, my business. And so we did about 7 to a year of these amazing transformational retreats, and had about 80 people go through our program. And one weekend would be equivalent, Shelby, of someone doing about 5 years of therapy in one weekend. So they were so amazing. And then she ended up getting pregnant with her first child. And so she knew she had to take a sabbatical for that 9 months. And so because of that, I thought, well, do I just pause Braveheart Workshops or what do I do? And so I felt like I was to rebrand. And so I rebranded my website from just the retreats with her to plan your event or come to one of my events. And so within a few months, I had my whole calendar booked for the entire year in 2020, and had everyone signing up to have me plan their events. And then one by one, they all canceled, except for one at a horse ranch when COVID hit. And so at that point, I was like, okay, now what do I do? And so I felt like, since I was staying at home anyway, and really wasn't doing a gig, believe it or not, Shelby, to make a lot of money. It was more just, having fun and not sitting at home feeling sorry for myself. So I had this vision to start a podcast show called The Connection Show, where I would interview entrepreneurs and people that had their own business and give them a platform where they could talk about their company and then hopefully monetize off of that and build their business. So one of my first guests, after she was on my show, she had to hire, I think it was 3 new employees because her business increased. So it was a lot of fun. And back then, the tagline, instead of hope, health, and healing, back then it was renew, restore, and reconnect in community. So that's kind of how we started. And then in 2021, I felt that the country, the world was really desperately needing hope, health, and healing. And so I changed the tagline from renew, restore, and reconnect in community to inspiring hope, health, and healing. And so in 2021, in March, we did our first virtual live event with about 8 speakers, and Dr. Laura Wood was on the panel for that. And she was able to talk about embodiment and trauma in the body for healing the body. And then in August of 2021, we did a live conference in Branson, Missouri, with 22 speakers sharing hope, health, and healing. And so now I'm just continuing on my journey. I do a little transformational coaching. In the interim of that, I was asked to be in a collaborative book called Fiercely Faithful. So I authored a chapter called The Essence of Humility. And I've been getting invited now to speak on different platforms. I'll be speaking in Kansas City the weekend of June 10th and 11th at Safe in His Arms Women's Revival. And then I'm asked to speak again at another event called Becoming the Best You Can Be in October in St. Louis. So things are just growing. And then now I'm taking my podcast, believe it or not, on the road. So I'm traveling now with the Reawaken Tour of America, Reawaken America Tour. And I did my podcast in San Diego. And then we went to Myrtle Beach. And then in July, we'll be in Virginia Beach. And in August, we'll be in Rochester, New York.
Wow. Quite the story of so many things just happening for you and, like taking it all and just growing and adapt. Like, I really enjoy that story. I'm curious. So with your own experience of what you've gone through, what are the things that you've learned and kind of like, what does the hope, health, and healing really mean for you?
Well, thank you for asking that. So I am a strong Christian. So when that vision came to me about 3 a.m. from God, and I felt like he was telling me to change the tagline. I said, tell me more. And so I felt like he was saying that hope needs to be in him. We put our hope in so many different things, like I hope for a promotion, or I hope I win the lottery, or I hope this, or I hope that. So I felt like hope represented hope in God, put our faith first in him. And then health of our body, I feel, as a result of being a Christian, that our body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. And so if it is the temple of the Holy Spirit, we're to honor it and to keep it well. So I've transitioned quite a bit in the last year, changed a lot of my food plan, changed a lot of my movement. And in the last 5 months, I've dropped about 25 pounds. Not that weight matters, but I felt like I needed to do some balance in my own life. And I needed to change some of my eating habits and my food plan about. So I never look at the word like good and bad food, because I think all food is good eaten in moderation. But I think that we can make some life changes and look at that and not look at food as good or bad or black and white, kind of going more into the gray. And then I believe healing has to do with, again, scripture talks about that there'll be 4 generations of sin passed on from our forefathers and ancestors, and that we need to break those generational wounds so that we can have blessings flow in our life. So I think the healing has to do with the mind and taking us back generationally and taking burdens back so that there's space in our lives to bring blessings into our life to pass on, not only to our great-grandparents, our grandparents, our parents, and ourselves, but our children and our children's children.
Wow. So powerful. And it just gives me kind of goosebumps hearing you say that, because it is so true. Like the whole concept of the hope, the health, and the healing, like the story behind all those 3 words are so accurate. And even if you're not religious in that sense, but you can't deny it, like you can't deny those hope, health, and healing, what they mean and what we feel when we are, representing that in the best way possible. You mentioned the retreats and doing these events to obviously bring forth this, like the Braveheart workshop is what you called it. And what has that been like with helping these people uncover these things and uncover these generational wounds so that they can be better? Like, what has that journey been like for you?
Well, when Laura and I were doing it, it was totally amazing, because people, one thing I learned, Shelby, what was a whole new transition for me, is I started to learn when people came to these events, they would register, and then it's so uncanny about anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks before the event, people one by one would try to figure out any way they possibly could to cancel because they were so afraid to look at their woundedness. Most people don't have the courage to look at their woundedness. So they'd start getting scared. And I would share with them in their fear that there was a purpose that they're supposed to show up. And instead of them being fearful, why not show up to the event with no intention? And I use that word because, Shelby, don't most of us like try to have all this intention in our life? I'm going to intend to be successful. I'm going to intend to get married and have children. You make all these intentions. And so I think sometimes creating intentions consistently in our life, there's goodness in goals. I'm not saying don't ever have a goal in your life, but when we're constantly focusing on our intentions, I think sometimes it brings more anxiety and stress into our life. So just kind of living one day at a time and not being sitting there wondering like, oh, I'm going to go to this intensive retreat and work on my burdens. And what am I supposed to think about? What am I supposed to do? What's it going to look like? And just show up, just show up. And so when you ask me, so a lot of times then, right when a person was getting ready to do their piece of work, sometimes they'd come up to me and go, I don't know what I should work on now because I didn't come with an intention. And so I said, that's awesome. So let's just pray for like 1 minute before you decide to go up and do your work and ask God to bring that one word to mind that is a burden in your life that you might even know it exists, and ask God to bring it to light right now. So when you walk into the center of the room to do your work, that one word would come. And I'm telling you, Shelby, it works amazing because God knows what we're stuck with. Many times we think we know, but I can tell you unequivocally in my own life, when I've done this myself and I just show up, like even when I still do therapy, even when I do my own therapy session, I never think about what I'm going to talk about. And my therapist will say, so what do you need to work on? And I'll just close my eyes and say, I don't know. I'll ask God. And then boom, something pops up. And I'm like, I didn't even know that was bothering me. Like I had no clue. That's what I needed for the day.
Wow. Yeah. It just takes probably putting people in these situations where they're allowed to have no intention probably is almost like freeing once they realize that they can do that. And kind of, it just makes me think of you are enough in that sense. Like you don't have to have the intention, you just showing up and wanting to be better is enough and that is okay. Right. And I think that's a very beautiful thing to be pushing and doing. So do you have any future goals with these events? Like any things like that you really want to start to do a bit more of that you really like?
Absolutely. We actually have one that I have put in draft mode on my website that will go live, I'm hoping, in the next week or two. And it's going to be amazing. It's going to be called Esther's Rising. And it's based on the story of Esther in the Bible. And she was raised by her uncle, Mordecai, because her parents died. And she became the queen. And the story is profound. And she was responsible of saving Israel and the Jews. And if it wasn't for Esther's stories, they would have been killed by the king. And so the story is very profound about how Esther rose to power and to healing and hope for Israel. And so I believe that we women are all Esthers. We all have the ability to rise. And to just have, we are here for a purpose, Shelby. And so this retreat, this conference will help women to really identify that they are Esthers, they are queens. But we're taking it a step further, that this vision just came to us that many of us as Esthers, our lives have also been impacted by kings in our life. And, I look at God or Jesus as the King of all kings, but many of us have kings in our lives, even if we're not married. Our kings could be a brother, a father, an uncle, a friend, or a husband, a spouse. And so I really believe that the kings in our life kind of represent the Mordecai, because without Mordecai giving Esther the life she had through him raising her, I don't think she would have been so empowered to be who she is. So I think the kings in our life are just as important as the Esthers. So we're going to be doing that conference.
That's awesome. So when you're preparing for these type of conferences, what are the type of things that you're doing to get ready and to get the people there? And I mean, as far as marketing goes, that can be a scary thing that a lot of people face. So what is that like for your conferences?
Well, I'll tell you truthfully, that is the part I hate the most. I like every part of event planning except getting butts in the seat. I just don't. And it's funny because I was a sales rep, but it was different when I was selling a product or services. It was something that I'd book an appointment and go and talk to people. But with marketing on the internet and through Zooms and all that, it's such a different way to do sales that is I don't like it. But what I love about event planning, my favorite part of event planning is finding the venues, negotiating. I am a master negotiator. I get the pricing that I want all the time. And then I think the hardest part is trying to secure a date. Dates are so hard where you're analyzing, like, should we do it in October? Should we do it in November? Which date? And you have to look at the whole calendar. This is going to fall over Veterans Day. This is going to be too close to Christmas. So event planning is an art. And there's a lot of people out there who think they want to plan an event, Shelby, that really need to stay in their own lane and do what they're best at. Because there's people out there that are amazing speakers, have amazing businesses that want to do workshops, conferences, and retreats who have no business planning them. I mean, they lose so much money. They don't know the time that is consumed. I literally, when I plan an event, it literally takes me 6 to 6 months of 10 to 12 hour days behind the scenes.
Wow.
And so a person who has a full-time gig, if they're, a podcaster, or they have their own marketing business, whatever they do, planning the event should be handed over to an event planner, I think, because I can't even begin to tell you how many mistakes people make.
Yeah. And is that part of your business? Like, you host your own events, but you host events for other.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm helping on the Safe in His Arms and the Becoming the Best You. Like, I go to the venue, I check it out. I make sure the banquet room or the meeting room or the breakout rooms are sufficient. I help negotiate the agreements with the hotel. Cause I was a general manager of a hotel, so I know their language. I know negotiation. I know what I can get and what I can't get. and I push till I get what I want, like attrition ratios and room blocks. And there's so much more to it than a person who's never done it knows.
Oh yeah. I can't even imagine, like, if you're going to step into it, all of a sudden you probably just get like a wave of just all the things involved that you wouldn't even consider. So that definitely just takes time learning. With that being said, has there been stuff within your own journey that, from where you are now, that you wish you knew a lot sooner?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. The one thing that I found out, like the one event we did in August, I'll just tell you, I had an amazing venue at a beautiful theater here in Branson where they do actually live plays. They do New Jersey nights, they do Anthems of the Rock. And so I negotiated with them a phenomenal price to be able to use their theater in between their shows. And it was phenomenal. It was the most amazing place. But what I didn't have in place, and I learned, and that's why I said people need to have someone specialized and know that even sometimes I make mistakes. So what I didn't realize is I didn't have enough volunteers lined up to do the setup and the breakdown, because we had a setup in the lobby and breakdown at the end of our event because the theater was doing shows that night. So we had to plan the event in between their shows. So that meant we had to break down the authors' tables in the lobby. And I didn't have enough volunteers. So I had to rely on my speakers, and they were not happy having to get there really early in the morning and stay afterwards. So that was one thing that I really learned and said, I'll never do it unless I got volunteers, because you don't want your speakers to have to do the work.
Yeah, exactly. I can imagine.
So that was one. And then, I think that was the biggest thing. And then I think too, managing the schedule better. I think, at that one we had 22 speakers, and we didn't have enough downtime for the attendees that were hearing really, really powerful, triggering topics, to be able to just chill. Like we went one speaker after another. So I think downtime is important. In my opinion now, if you do an event, you do two speakers and I think these events that are trying to get speakers to speak for only 20 minutes, I think you're wasting their time. Give them 30 minutes to an hour. 20 minutes is never enough, ever. So you don't want a speaker to travel for less than 30 minutes, 30, 45, an hour's best, and then do two speakers and then a 30-minute maybe break or a 40-minute breakout session. So they can go together in a breakout session and they can process what they just heard. So having lots of speakers versus quality speakers spread out with breaks and breakout times is much more effective.
Yeah, good to know. That makes sense. And even with like, if someone's listening to a podcast episode, like your show, it's almost similar to if they were to hear a speaker for that 30 minutes. You can't just kind of jump from one to the other. You really have to take a minute to kind of process that. And if you're going to build a good event or whatever, a good listening experience, you really want to make sure that you're taking that into consideration. So yeah, that's good. With your podcast, I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that. What spurred on you wanting to start your own podcast, and what has that been like for you?
Well, like I said, what spurred it on is when all my events canceled. And so, but it's taken on a whole different light. I'm telling you, Shelby, that I never, ever anticipated. I mean, I never did. So again, I started off by just interviewing some entrepreneurs, which began where they talked about their company. I don't do that at all anymore. And sometimes I don't like to tell you my secret sauce, but my secret sauce really is that my guests want to know what we're going to talk about. And I say, just show up with no intention. And most people have a hard time. They're like, well, what questions are you going to ask me? I said, don't know, just show up. And so when they come on, they're not sure what's going to take place. And so I get them really sharing their entire life story. And I can't tell you how many guests have been on my show where they'll just start crying, or they'll like go, wow, this is like one of the best shows I've been on. I didn't even know we were going to do this today. And so it's leading me down a whole new path where now I just had the privilege of being able to bring my podcast to the Branson Film Festival that was in town, that had Christian movie stars, actresses, film writers, screenwriters. And I was able to interview the likes of Kevin Sorbo, who played Hercules back in the day. And he starred in many films, including Soul Surfer and God's Not Dead. And I was able to interview the amazing Tina Gallo, who's been on lots of soap operas in the United States and movies. And then it took me into a whole different light where I was able to interview some amazing American patriots who are really trying to help the country right now and share some of the truths around COVID and the health crisis. And so I'm just interviewing like so many amazing people like that I never expected.
But you're kind of like taking your own medicine where it's like, have no intentions, you just do it and see what happens. And usually that's like the most beautiful things come from that, right? When you're not planning, it just unfolds how it's kind of meant to. So I think that's really, really a good message for people to know. And if other people are trying to start a podcast, just like sometimes making all those plans aren't as necessary than just that intention of what you're trying to do and put out there. And if you just kind of show up in that way, that these connections come.
Well, and what's truthful too is, so a lot of times, my guests have to send me a bio and their headshot because I send a virtual background like I have here for them. But until they send it to me, I know nothing about them. So what's kind of nice is like how you're interviewing me right now is I don't know a lot about them. And so they'll start sharing. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know you did that. That is so amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. You're curious. Like if you just show up with that curiosity, like I don't like I have your information, but it's very little. And I'm like, I like it that way because I don't want to know too much because then we can just have like an authentic conversation. And that's what makes a great podcast show. So
I agree with you because, that's kind of how it is when you meet people for the first time. You don't know anything about them, but you start asking questions and share. And then before the night's over or whatever, you're like, wow, we had more in common than I thought.
Exactly. And that's just part of the whole community building, which really in the grand scheme of what you're doing and like with these events, it's all about building that community and making sure everyone feels more connected and a better understanding as well. Like they're learning at the same time of building these connections and having these network experiences. Do you have any sort of future goals, like for your podcast with that, of building these type of communities around it?
Well, that's funny you say that because when the Connection show started, I had this vision where my guests would come on, but then the audience wouldn't have a chance to connect with them. So I started to do Zoom connection circles. When we began, we did them every week. And it was great. But then, after a while, it was hard for people to make the commitments week after week after week. So we are going back. In fact, I'll look on my calendar. It's on my website. I think it's June 29th. On June 29th, I think, yep, we're going back to the Connection Circle platform again. And so I have a Facebook page called Connection Circles. You must go to that Facebook page and give your email so I can email a secure Zoom link so we just don't have anybody, jumping on. And that way you can come into the Connection Circles and connect in community with like-minded people and just get to know each other better.
That's awesome. Yeah. I've actually experienced that as well, where it's like you said, it's like you can have the interview, but sometimes it's nice to bring the other people in on it and make them feel connected. It's nice for us to do it as the host, but it's really powerful and beautiful to be able to share that and give other people the chance to do that as well. So,
well, it gives them a space too, when they start to feel safer to share more about themselves. And I'll just share one quick story that I think is so imperative, is one particular person who jumped on one time. And this was right before my virtual event in March of 2021. She had a plan to commit suicide that week. And she came onto the Connection Circle and was able to authentically share with us her pains and struggles. And then she signed up for the virtual and she ended up going back to church, getting closer to God and connecting more with us as a community. And it saved her life. So there was many times that people are hurting and they don't have a platform to feel like there's connection in their life. So we really want the Connection Circle to be a platform where you feel loved and wanted and needed.
Wow. That's like, oh man, that's like the ultimate gift that you can kind of give, is like you're helping one person so dramatically in their life. And that's the goal, right? Like if you can help those people. And it kind of just makes me think as well, not to get too far off, but just like people maybe want to do these events, but they want to fill the seats. They want to bring thousands of people there before they even start. They're like, my first show has to be this. But really in reality, it's like, if you're able to do that for that one person, like if you can help one person, like that's enough, And I think to me, like, that's what I'm just thinking of right now. And like you want to have something big and successful and you want to be Tony Robbins and have this huge thing. But really, if you're able to just help that one person, then you're doing your work. And I think that's
it's funny you say that, because when we did the event in August, the theater held 1,600 seats, and we only sold like a little, like right around 100 tickets. But even though people bought, like 100 people bought tickets, and we had 22 speakers, the weekend of the event, so much was happening with the country shutting down yet again. And so only about 30 or 40 people showed up in the 22 speakers. So the auditorium by far looked empty. But what we discovered, it was so cool, Shelby. It was amazing, is on the final day when we all were on stage, all 22 speakers, and we were praying over those who came, vision that none of this event was about films at all. The whole vision was, I had the vision to inspire hope, health, and healing in the world. And then from there, that vision was to be cast on the 22 speakers and onto the 30 or so in the audience and the 30 or so listening virtually. And so the saying hope, health, and healing that I got for me wasn't to be just my gift. It was, I was going to ask you, Shelby, will you spread hope, health, and healing to the world? And then would you ask your friends and your family, so that we can carry this all around the world, that all together we could inspire hope, health, and healing. It was not just to be my tagline. It was to be shared.
Yeah. That ripple effect, right? You help the one and it just continues on. And that's where a lot of these movements come from. So that's awesome. I love the work you're doing and really inspiring. And I hope people listening will get something from this. So with that being said, anyone listening that wants to learn more and find more information about these retreats or about your podcast, where can they find you?
Yeah, my website is simple. It's called braveheartworkshops with an S.com, braveheartworkshops.com. And then I have my Facebook page, like I said, which is Braveheart Workshops. I have Braveheart Workshops public group and public page and a group. And then, of course, that page I told you, which is called Connection Circles. And then I have another page called Hope, Health, and Healing. I'm on a YouTube channel. I'm on Rumble. And so you can find me there as well to listen to all my podcasts. And please, the big thing I'd ask is please subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the gray bell and the all, so that you'll get a notice whenever a new podcast interview is going to be on there. And then subscribe to Rumble as well. And then ask all your friends. It's free to subscribe, and you'll hear all the amazing interviews that we're doing. And I do put the interviews on my website too.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. I love that. It's just our little way that we can contribute and try and share the goodness that other people are able to get for free. So definitely everyone listening, check it out. And I just want to say thank you on behalf of myself and everyone listening. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your story with us, because there's definitely a lot of takeaways that we can all start just thinking about a little bit more in our own lives. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Shelby.
Yay.